Cool. So thanks for meeting with me today, Eleanor. It'll be great to hear a bit about your experience. So I think I've remembered right that you're a clinical psychologist.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we start with, what do you do at the moment? How do you spend your weeks?
Sure. So I mostly at the moment and for a number of years have worked in the NHS
Mm-hmm.
in England, mostly in London, but during the pandemic I did have a post also in Oxford running a staff support service.
Right.
Which was really interesting for various reasons, and partly because it was COVID as well. But in my NHS, so working with NHS staff, supporting NHS staff, but in my post
Yeah.
in London, I work with adults who would fit under the broad umbrella of complex trauma. So
Right.
adults that have like complex post-traumatic stress disorder, who experience a lot of dissociation as a result of trauma. And I've learned and practice a number of different kinds of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly I've learned how to make adaptations to the therapy models in order to meet the needs of the people that I see.
Yeah. Because this is a complex client group, isn't it? We're not talking about
It is.
straightforward difficulties.
No,
We're not talking, I'm guessing, sort of limited number, where I guess in some NHS services, perhaps if somebody's got a fairly straightforward phobia or other anxiety or issue with their mood, they might get maybe 6 or 8 sessions. You work on that issue, they move on. This is more complex and I'm presuming takes longer to resolve.
Yes, absolutely. And within our kind of stretched healthcare services, we have got to put some system boundaries around things. We have got to put some limits around things, but they're not, they're probably not as much with the client in mind as we would like.
Right.
But we have got some guidance to help us, but we don't have a lot of guidance and the evidence that we would have for things like phobias, for treating complex trauma, for treating dissociative conditions, for treating things like dissociative identity disorder. And we see people that would meet that diagnostic threshold as well.
Yeah.
So you are having to really be creative with what you do in your assessment, in your understanding of people, your formulation, as we call it in psychology, and how you apply particular therapy models.
Yeah.
Which, and that's really what I've done with quite a bit of my career, but in different places and kind of through different lenses.
Yeah.
So I'll explain what I mean by that. When I started as an assistant psychologist, I worked in a service for people that had experienced burns. And we looked at kind of trauma from more of a visible difference perspective, and also adjustment to conditions, adjustment to maybe loss, and worked with kids and adults at that time.
Yeah.
And really, that was when I started to kind of see things actually through a trauma lens.
Yeah.
Even before I qualified. And
yeah.
I got
Did you realise
interested.
that then, or was it more like looking back that you realised you were thinking
I
about trauma?
realised looking back, and I had a supervisor then who I didn't actually get on with very well at all. But we worked on our relationship, and it came good in the end.
Well done.
It's been one of my greatest achievements, I think. Actually working through that relationship. But I observed her doing EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, a type of therapy that some clinical psychology courses will allow you a budget now to train.
I've seen this, yes.
If you choose to, but I learnt mine postdoctorally because I didn't have that option on my course at the time. And I'm now an EMDR consultant, which means I can teach and train other people and supervise other people. And that's also a lot of what I do in my day job. And I really love that. And I really think the model, I have a lot of passion for the model. I have a lot of interest. And why I think is because I've really seen it be transformational for people. And I've seen it be transformational in quite a short amount of time. So from a kind of ethical perspective, I want to offer something that's going to reduce people's suffering as quickly as possible. I
Yeah.
want to offer them choice. So I have other models that I also use. I also really like narrative exposure therapy. That's another complex PTSD model. And various other things I've trained in over the years. But I've really seen EMDR be very powerful, so I think that's why I'm keen on it.
Yeah.
And I remember as an assistant observing her doing this thing that just looked a bit voodoo, a bit magic, a bit weird. I thought,
So to perhaps
surely,
note for the audience that we sometimes will use rapid eye movements from
yes,
side to side, or we might
yes,
get people to tap themselves.
yes, yeah,
So the number one question is always, what on earth is going on, isn't it? And I've made a note for myself while we've been talking that I'm going to share a link to the EMDR Association website, because they have some great
perfect.
videos, don't they? Giving
They
that
do,
overview of EMDR, which I think will
they
be
do,
helpful for
yes.
people.
Yeah, and that's definitely
Um,
where I'd recommend people go for good information on EMDR and EMDR practice. Um, so yes, it's actually got a very vast evidence base, and it's, like I say, it's really helpful for lots of different conditions. And yeah, so it's funny really, that I kind of ended up being the person that I observed all those years ago in a way. And
yeah.
then, so after that, as an assistant, I then did clinical training. And I think because I did a forensic master's. So I did my undergrad. I was told on my
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, in terms of like, why am I a clin psych? I was told on my undergrad, which was in Liverpool, that people don't really get on to clinical psychology. It's very competitive. Just don't bother. Don't kind of bother really, because you guys
Yeah,
probably are not going to make
yeah,
it.
I was told the same. Yeah, yeah.
Very
Sorry to talk over
negative
you. Yeah, I was told the
message.
same.
And I have a stubborn part that goes, but why not me? And I wasn't your typical candidate, because, I come from a very working class family. I am the only person that's ever gone to university in my
Right.
family. My parents migrated, so English is not their first language. Um, And, I did not grow up in a house where I got my homework done by my parents by any means. I grew up in a
Yeah.
house where I was a bit of a carer. I was quite responsible for kind of helping my parents navigate the social system, the school system. Upside of that is I could get away with certain things because they didn't know.
Yeah, yeah,
I was never grounded because they didn't know what grounding was,
yeah.
for
There's pros and
example.
cons to everything, right?
Yeah. But I had to really work hard to, from a young age, to navigate that system, to educate my parents, actually. So, and I think one of my escapes really, and one, and actually my mum always pushed education for me, particularly. She has a value around education, and I think I saw that as my kind of way out of,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, poverty, wave to a better life,
Yeah,
to kind of mix with different people that
yeah.
I wouldn't meet otherwise. Um, and I knew that that's what she particularly wanted for me. And so that's what I went and did. I kind of, I heard that message of, oh, you're not really going to get through this barrier, very competitive. And then I thought, well, I wouldn't mind proving you wrong, actually. I went and did a master's because I knew you could get an extra point on your clinical psychology form if you did a master's. So I thought
Okay.
might get more interviews that way. It's hundreds of people to one place, or or not quite maybe, but it was a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe 20, no, it was maybe like 27 to a place or something on average. And then I applied and applied and applied and applied.
Oh, bless you.
And I had a really strange journey because I got interviews in my first year and my second year. No, I got interviews in my first year, and then I got no interviews in year 2 and year 3. And I supported friends who kind of got onto clinical training. I supported them with with their processes, and I started to feel really glum and down about not progressing myself. And then, but I continued, and then in year 4, I got on to training. So it wasn't an easy journey for me because I don't think I understood all the nuances and all the buzzwords, and I didn't have the education behind me in the same way that other people did.
Right.
So it did take me longer, I think. And then I got onto training, and I had a good experience on my training course. And I did the masters. I got into training in East London. I actually got 2 places after getting no places for
Well
ages.
done. That
I
shows
was
it.
offered 2 training places, one in London, one in Birmingham, and I chose London. East London, University of East London, and they have a kind of quite a social constructionist lens. So they're very, very questioning of things like the typical evidence base or kind of typical ways of working where you like sit in a clinic and see people. And maybe partly because of that, I had really varied placements because I think because I had that forensic background and because I was I think people get the impression that I was fairly robust. They did put me on some very interesting placements. Forensic learning disability was one of my placements.
Gosh, that's an unusual one.
Yes, really interesting though. I enjoyed it, and I had a couple of trainee friends, which made all the difference actually. That you can form a little bit of an alliance with people that are in the same boat. And I did a kind of inpatient ward, acute work in East London. Very, very kind of complex, very distressed people. Something actually pretty horrible happened on that placement, and it was my first placement. So
oh gosh, but you
there was
stayed, you stuck it out.
There was a lot of very impactful things that sort of happened, and on I went. And my last placement was at what was then a charity called MAC UK.
Yes, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And they worked with, at the time, what we called young people, not in neat young people, not in education or training. And we worked in a very fluid way. We would do we would do sort of therapy on the football pitch. We would do, I actually, after training, I went and worked for them for a while, and I ran a project that offered music and mental health workshops to schools, pupil referral units, prisons, and I delivered it with young people. So it was really quite kind of a co-production, co-production kind of model. But it had psychology at the governance level, kind of, running things, but then what was actually given to the young people was co-produced. So we did like rap workshops and, loads of like very cool stuff that I didn't think I'd be doing.
No.
I offered a bit of the mental health stuff, although, the guys were much more interesting and inspirational than I was. And I did that for a while and I enjoyed it. But it's a very fast-paced kind of way of working. You've got to really constantly respond to things. And after a while, I thought, oh, I wonder if this is a bit too niche. And I came back to the NHS.
Right.
To get different, more varied experience, really. Also, the NHS pay a bit better than charities, which did matter.
It's important. Yeah.
In London, it's very difficult on a kind of early career psychology salary to pay your rent. People usually have help in some way, or they do actually quite struggle to pay rent in London. And I think that's probably why we struggle now to fill posts in the NHS.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Even with London waiting, it doesn't quite, in my mind, it doesn't suffice to the cost. And I think a lot of
No.
areas now are very expensive, actually, but I think it's perhaps a bit heightened in London still.
Mm.
Yeah, so I do remember why I did the forensic masters is because I used to watch Cracker. I don't know if you remember Cracker,
I
the
do,
forensic
yeah. I didn't. It wasn't one that I
psychologist.
watched regularly, but I was sort of
Yeah.
familiar with it. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I used to think, oh, that's cool. Going and examining like dead bodies and working out psychological profiling, offender
yeah,
profiling
yeah,
and what they did. And in Liverpool was like David Cantor, who was very famous for that. And I actually wanted to go on and do my masters with David Cantor and some other people in the team. But I did end up moving in the end. I was just really fascinated by that area. But then I kind of discovered, as you do, that actually an offender profiler in real life is really not as appealing as it looks on the TV. And
I'm sure
also,
that can be said about a lot of jobs, can't it?
yeah, and I also did a placement in a young offenders institution while I was doing my masters, and I learned how difficult it was to be therapeutic in a prison setting.
Yeah, yeah,
And I thought actually, and I already had my eye on clinical training, like I said, and I thought, actually, let me go and do this clinical thing and see how that works out for me. I quite liked the idea of being in education for a while too.
yeah,
It felt
yeah,
like it delayed having to make like real life adult decisions in a way. Although you were doing a very responsible real life job, you could kind of put off maybe some other things. So
I'm really noticing your enthusiasm as you're talking. And I mean, for me, this is one of the things I love about being a psychologist is we can work in so many different settings and there's so much more that we can always learn, isn't there? There's different kinds of therapy. There's different client groups that we can work with. And from what you've said, your career to date has been really varied. Um,
yeah, definitely.
so that doesn't surprise me that you felt like that about staying in education.
No, I think there's all, and I remember I took a philosophy module as part of my undergrad degree. And I remember just a guy in the front row who was about 85, and he just was still so impassioned by education and learning. And
Yeah,
I thought, yeah, you could do this for life. Why not? Why not?
yeah,
If you love it and you can do it, why not? Um,
yes,
but yeah, so I am still in the NHS, because I believe in, um, you know, I believe in access for people,
mm-hmm.
that people should be able to access good quality psychological care, and that inequalities shouldn't matter
Yeah,
for them to do that. But I do also have a little private practice that I've worked in for 6 odd years or so, 6, 7 years, which I've not massively expanded in that time because I've chosen to stay in healthcare
yeah,
at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I've had a family in that time as well. So, obviously that your focus also shifts a bit, doesn't
yeah.
it?
It does,
Um,
and it's juggling all of it, making sure
yeah,
that everything works. We've
yeah.
only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask you. You might have covered this already, but particularly because I love your enthusiasm. What are your favourite bits about being a psychologist?
My favourite things about being a psychologist. I mean, you can apply psychology to so many things, I think, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that in many ways, I'm applying it to sort of um, offenders, people that do harm to other people, and really thinking about what's going on there, what's happening psychologically for people that they do that, what are the factors that are kind of impact people. But then also thinking about, using the different theories that we have, seeing if they actually work, testing
Yeah,
them out on people. You know, we're very we like sort of things like attachment theory, but we have to think across cultures, for example. Does that work? You know,
yeah,
um, and I've done quite a bit on the side of, working with organisations outside of healthcare. I will give a shout out to the London ACEs Hub.
London ACEs Hub.
Yeah, London ACEs Hub, who are really, really about, I'm one of the founder members, just for full disclosure. But it's totally charitable. No, there's nothing in it financially for me. But one of what's really kind of fundamentally important to them is about kind of spreading seeds about adverse childhood experiences and why they're so important to be recognised, identified.
Lovely.
Yeah. So so I think that's what's kind of really interesting to me, is that you can just use psychological knowledge and apply it to so many things, and you can do system work. System work is really fun to me. It's complicated. It does hurt your brain. And my brain does feel tired these days, but it is also exciting. It is also, innovative. So, I like that. And I really like thinking about the people doing the work in organisations, like the staff. Your staff are your biggest resource in any organisation, and you've got to take care of them. And I see a lot of people not being taken care of. And really like to think about that and how we can do better around that. And I think it's you can work in different domains, can't you? And you can decide if you want to go into private work. You can work on different therapy models and get really good at therapy models, and then I actually love now doing supervision and training of other therapists and offering kind of consultation to other psychologists, therapists, whoever will actually listen and care about my opinion, really. I also really like working with non-psychologists, because I think we can become a bit of an echo chamber. And again, there's a lot of opportunity to do that as well. So I suppose, and you can earn good money, and I think it's important to say that, really, and we don't need to be shy about that. We just just being honest. I don't think many of us are certainly not wealthy, but you can make a good living out of this career.
Thank you. I'm going to pause the recording there. And I think there's so much you've said that's going to be really interesting for people. Where is my stop recording button? I'm touching the screen and it's not coming up. There we go.